Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. All right, women, welcome back to another week on the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. So, really, in alignment with today's episode, I have been having just so many conversations with the women around me about nourishment. And nourishment is on so many levels, and we really get into nourishment on the food level in Emma's episode today. But what I'm realizing too is nourishment is so much more than what we eat. And I think that what we eat is a really big starting off place, because I know for myself and many other women, once I stopped restricting my food and I stopped restricting myself from eating meat and milk and fish and eating a lot, once I started eating a lot, I knew what I needed to nourish myself in so many other ways because I'd created safety in my system that I had enough. And I'd created the knowing in myself that I am worthy of so much. In Emma's episode, we get into this idea that eating a vegan diet can create this sensation of over-identifying with prey, when actually, as humans, we are predators. And so, in case you're new here, I prioritize nourishment here in my corner of the internet. I prioritize women living in alignment with their cycles. I prioritize deep female friendships. And I prioritize pleasure and joy and living a life that's close to the earth and connected to our bodies. And so some of the things I have to offer you are my womb cycle Spotify playlists, which is a free gift for you women. There is a playlist for each archetype of your menstrual cycle, the maiden, the mother, the sorceress, and the crone, for you to begin to really learn to embody these 4 women you get to be each month. I also have your period prep guide, which is a complete 30+ page ebook outlining all the steps you can take to have a restful, blissful, pleasurable bleed, including the practical things, the energetic things, and rituals to connect deeper. And of course, you can always book a discovery call or a one-on-one session with me to work towards deeper supporting you and your individual needs. All right, so on today's episode of the podcast, we have my sweet sister, Emma. Emma has a really inspiring story of fully claiming her right to choose her own life at each turn. In this episode, we get to hear how Emma went from a full-time nomadic life, raw veganism, and city living, and how that created chronic pelvic pain and finding out she had a cyst. So Emma's story is really one of learning to slow down and heal her body from the roots up by living outside, eating for her primal female body, and truly nourishing herself on so many different levels. She has a really beautiful way of articulating life's paradox of both challenge and beauty. And she has a very magical and sweet story of her first bleed that I know you'll just absolutely love. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi.
It's really fun to have you here because we've obviously already had so many conversations about womb health and the like. So I'm excited to see where we go today.
Mhm.
And the first question I want to ask you is to just share with everyone what phase of life you're in and what phase of your cycle you're in.
Hi, everyone. I'm very much in my maiden phase of life, still exploring who I am in this world and figuring out and navigating and going through all the messiness and the beauty. And yeah, I'm in my maiden phase of life, and I am in my follicular phase of my cycle. I just finished bleeding, and it's like my favorite phase. I feel so good. Energy's rising. And it's funny because Natalie and I are literally synced. When I met you, you got your cycle really early and mine was late. It was almost as if our spirits knew we were about to meet each other, and we've been synced since.
So amazing. I love that so much because
Yeah.
like kind of worried about your period being late. And I was like,
Yeah.
huh, and mine's early.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah. So I love that you're sharing like, yeah, like in the maiden phase of life and just like exploring and figuring out who you are because I don't know, I think that like that's not something that is that valued in our society as like exploring yourself and like figuring out who you are and like taking your time in doing that.
Mhm.
So I think it's really wonderful that that's an intention that you have.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm also curious, like exactly, do you know what day of your cycle you're on? Because I'm on day 9.
Yeah, I should be on today's the 23rd. I am on like day 6 or 7.
Okay. So we're
Hmm.
pretty close still.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it is such a fun phase, the follicular phase. And, the follicular phase is associated with the maiden archetype. So it's like when you're in the maiden phase of your life and in the maiden phase of your cycle, there's just a certain alignment that comes about. And it's probably why it
Hmm.
feels so good and nourishing and exciting for you to be in that phase.
Hmm. Yeah, just like feels like springtime. Stuff is lighter, stuff is more beautiful. I feel it's beautiful in all the phases and all the feels for sure. But yeah, totally, totally feel the maiden springtime energy.
What are like, do you notice there's certain activities or things that you do in this phase of your cycle?
I feel like my lens, like how I walk around, definitely is different. I'm taking in more beauty is the word that keeps coming up. Also, my energy's rising, so I allowed myself to rest while I was bleeding, and now I'm like, all right, I'm ready to move things. Like things have moved and I'm ready to move. Um, so
Mm.
just more hikes, maybe more walks. I feel like I want to sweat more of like a purge of what just happened in my bleed. Um, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, hikes for sure. I didn't even really mean to go on this long of a hike yesterday, but I went on a 5-mile hike and it was like that felt so good in this phase of my cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, moving the energy, like especially when you are living in right relationship with your cycle, like you said, you're resting on your period. Then when you
Mm-hmm.
come to this phase, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love to the like noticing the lens of the world is different and that you're seeing more beauty because that really is something that I think is so unique to the maiden energy is there's this sense of like childlike wonder and awe and also a sense of being connected to your sensuality more and to being
Mm-hmm.
really attuned to all of those senses, which is really beautiful. That.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So take me back a little bit to your like early maidenhood days. I would love to hear if you remember what was your first bleed like.
Yeah, so I grew up going to summer camp. Um, I'd say I was going into 8th grade. It was my first day of camp, and it was actually in these mountains in Appalachia, which is really sweet remembering now because that's where I live and that's where I feel at home. And it was my first day of camp. We have like our swim test that day, we have different water activities that need to be taken care of. And my best friend what came into the stall with me and inserted a tampon into my vagina. And that was a nice like sisterhood support moment because I think
Yeah.
she had her bleed for like 3 years already. And yeah, I don't think I felt embarrassed. I think I was like, all right, this is what's happening. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously weird years going through puberty and discovering yourself, but trying to remember any feelings of embarrassment. I'm not sure that I felt that.
That's great. I'm
Hmm.
curious. So did you tell your friend you had your period and then she was like, let me help you? Or did you ask for help? Like, how did that go?
No, I was definitely like, there's different stalls.
Yeah.
I was definitely like, oh my God, I just like got my period. I'm spotting. And she like, we went to the infirmary probably. Got there was only like cardboard tampons that you have to insert, and she stuck it up me, and she
Wow.
helped me. She just offered to,
Aw.
which helped with being in a bathing suit and stuff. I don't wear tampons anymore, but it's just part of my story then.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. That's so sweet because it reminds me of my story in a certain way where when I first started bleeding, like I wanted that. I really wanted someone to help. And like everyone said no. It wasn't until I got
Mm.
to college when like I had a close friend of mine who was like, yeah, I'll help you. And then it was actually taking the tampon out because I had gotten it in and then freaked out that it was in and needed the help taking it out. And I called
Hmm.
her and she came over and helped me. And so that was like a sweet healing moment. But I love that like from the start you had this like sisterhood of
Hmm.
women supporting each other through the blood mysteries and your very first blood mystery. Like what an imprint to leave you with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't remember like how many days it was or anything of that sorts, but that moment definitely stuck with me about it. And
Mm,
that it was outside at camp. I guess my body felt ready and safe to bleed on this like really special fertile land.
yeah.
Coming from the city, and then finally I came into the forest and it was like, oh,
Oh, so
you
you
are.
were living in the city.
Yeah, I grew up in Miami, so
Yeah.
I would come to Georgia mountains for camp, and
Mm,
it's really interesting.
cool. That's
Hmm.
beautiful too, because like our blood is really, gosh, in so many ways guiding us and it
Hmm.
contains like imprints of our DNA. And you put your first bleed, that DNA, like that was on the land in Appalachia where you are now and like where you're feeling called to live. Like that's magical.
Really is. It
Wow.
really is. And I was just in my last bleed this last weekend was in Costa Rica, which also felt like it's so fertile over there. It's so feminine over there. She
Mm,
wanted my blood too. So yeah, definitely it has a bigger plan for us than we can even comprehend. So what a nice full circle moment to realize that.
I love those moments. It's so cool because it's surprising, but then it's also just like, oh, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that
Mhm.
sweet story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, you get your first bleed at camp. And then you're also sharing, I want to touch back on this a little. You're like, oh, okay, I don't wear tampons anymore, but that was part of my story then. And we haven't talked about that too much on this podcast. So share a little bit about why you don't use tampons now.
Yeah, I think naturally it's all just been a mystery of how this more free bleeding connected to my blood phase of life has happened. But I switched from tampons. I was like, okay, let me try the Diva cups. That felt really not okay in me either, personally, like the suction. And then sometimes you put it in wrong and it hurts. Period underwear, I got turned on to those. But like these days, everything's just stained. I like sometimes forget to use protection, and like all my sheets are stained. My partner like not phased, super grateful for that. I'm just like as much as I can, I'm trying to just bleed on the earth too and just like really let it flow. I felt that I didn't want to plug up the natural flow. I just wanted to aid it in
Mm.
oozing.
Uh, I love that. And I love the stains everywhere because I can so relate. Like, oh,
Literally.
this is just life now. And sometimes I just love it. Like I love free bleeding and then just seeing like patches of red on my thighs too. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, this is what it means to be a woman.
Hmm.
It's beautiful because it just like you actually have to look at your blood when you're free bleeding and like when you're yeah, like when you're not using certain products, like you have to look at it and interact with it. And it's interesting because like sometimes when you're free bleeding, it does feel like an inconvenience.
Hmm.
But I think that that's good. Like we should know that we're bleeding. We should know that something is different. We can't just go about our day-to-day activities. Do you feel like that does that for you too?
Totally. I'm thinking more of like down to like what pants I have to wear. It's just, it's all part of it. I'm like,
Mm.
I want to be in my big granny panties. How can I pull this off in the best way that I feel comfortable?
Mm,
Yeah, totally. Looking at it in my thighs, like, oh, covered in blood.
yeah,
Yeah.
love that.
Hmm.
So, okay, you have your first bleed at camp. You said going into eighth grade.
Hmm.
And then, like, how are those first few years of bleeding? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Probably just plugging myself with a tampon and going about my days. And I do think I always felt comfortable, um, not shy about it. I would probably like pull out my tampons and show my friends and like I didn't really have painful periods back then either. It felt nothing is sticking out to me from my upbringing years, my becoming years
Mm,
with my blood.
mm. Did you have like education around it from your mom or from anyone? Like, how did you learn about periods?
Probably from my mom and my sister, just going through the motions. Stick your leg on the toilet and put the tampon in. Luckily, we were very comfortable naked family already that I
Yeah.
felt support from my mom and my sister. But probably did learn it from their lens too. Like they're not definitely not letting their blood flow everywhere, which is okay. But yeah, I came to that stuff more on my own.
Yeah. I love that you say come naked family. I need to hear more about this.
It's really nice. And yeah, I think too, like my boyfriend growing up was cool with it, which is huge. I feel that in people's stories, maybe having that stigma against your blood can really feel shameful and make you feel like hiding it. Um, but yeah, I feel like I've always kind of felt comfortable.
Hmm. I love that. It's so sweet.
Hmm.
Is there like a first memory after your first bleed? I like to think of it as what I learned from my teachers, which is our red thread. So the sort of thread that weaves through all of the different stories we have in relation to our womb, our blood, our womanhood. And so I'm curious, like if you tune into that red thread after your first bleed, is there like a point that comes up next?
Mm. What keeps popping into my head is like maybe getting on birth control and that being like some sort of synthetic bleed or like
Mm,
a different type of bleed is what I'm thinking of my next thread,
mhm.
which was probably 3 years after.
Okay.
But really, what's coming to mind is that shift in perspective once I started hormonal birth control.
What did it feel like? Like, what did that shift feel like for you? Do you remember?
I think now looking back is more I'm feeling an imprint than then. Again, I was just like going through the motions and doing what was told. Um, so I think back then I was just doing the things, but now I'm seeing that I definitely like it was less of that raw experience.
Hmm. And were you taking like birth control pills?
Mm-hmm.
How did that affect you?
I think maybe that's like in line with when puberty really started too. Like my breasts were growing, got more hips a little bit. Um, but then I was only on birth control for like 3 years.
Mm. It's interesting because a lot of women have that perspective of their first kind of imprint being their first bleed. And then usually it's like that. The next thing it's like, oh, and then I got on birth control.
Mm-hmm.
Say this in like every episode that it's become this like weird rite of passage that almost like takes the place of an honest rite of passage, which is our first bleed. But most women remember
Mm-hmm.
like getting on birth control very vividly. And yeah, it's quite interesting. It's become this weird thing in our society. And of course it felt synthetic to you. It's like what birth control does is it disrupts the communication between your brain and your ovaries. And so there is this like fake hormonal blueprint that takes over the instinctual and natural innate hormonal blueprints.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even if we're not consciously aware of that at the time, like we can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Some women feel that most women feel that they are different people when they come off of birth control. So what was coming off of it like for you?
I think it was that radical choice of I want to align more naturally, like I want to feel the wild woman, like let my body do its thing. I think that's when I started bleeding all over the place and like
Mhm.
just this bigger step into the wild woman of being natural as can be and not wanting anything to interfere my body's natural rhythms and cycles for sure.
And what inspired that in you? Like, was this an ongoing process or like was there a moment? Take me back.
There's probably just a moment where I was awakening to so much and how I want to live closer to nature in my day to day, the dwellings I live in, the activities I'm doing, the beings I'm speaking to, and then my body's physiological natural rhythms was part of that too.
Mm.
Um, it was this transformative year, like my first year of college was I didn't go to a party school. I was just like hanging out in the woods every day and experimenting with psychedelics and wanting to be natural and all all the things.
And you felt like, okay, I'm ready to like reclaim my body's rhythms.
hmm Which is a big responsibility too, and that's also what led me to learning about ovulation windows and the phases of our cycles and the activities to do in the phases. Uh, yeah, so once I stopped the birth control, it was like a deeper initiation to learn more about what that natural rhythm is.
I'm curious, do you remember your first bleed after birth control?
I actually think it stopped. My period stopped for a year, my
Mm.
bleed.
After you got
Um,
off it?
After I got off it, I was also raw vegan, which now I've learned is a big no-no, at
Mm.
least my perspective for my body.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it was a big shock. I lost all my body fat. I went
Mm.
off birth control. My body took a year to cycle until I started eating more things and introducing more foods back into my diet. Yeah, I got really addicted to the eating uncooked fresh foods, no fats, no proteins, literally like fruit and salads, which I feel also I am dealing with some trauma from that too.
Mm. What do you mean?
um, my womb since then has really been speaking to me in a lot of pain. And I've done more research and learned how we need to support our bodies as women and our hormones with fats and meats and proteins and all the nourishing, warm
Mm.
foods. The womb likes to be warm, and I really deprived it for a bit. I felt good spiritually. I felt good like momentarily, but I think there was consequences to that. And that's a whole other journey that I'm going through with my womb for sure.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that because I think it's a story that a lot of women can relate to. There was this really big vegan phase, and I think a lot of people are still in it for sure. But I also know a ton of women who are like you and me who have woken up from sort of the lie that veganism is like the healthiest way to be in a body. And it really reminds me of just how many health trends have no um, regard for women's cycles.
Mhm.
And veganism, I mean, I don't think it's actually great for men either, but I think it's especially detrimental for women because, like, certain phases of our cycle, especially like you think about the follicular phase, like after bleeding, you need a lot of fat. Like, your body needs yin from the outside to nourish yin on the inside, as my mentor Kristen says. And,
Mm.
you know, most of the fats that you could get in a vegan diet, they're not saturated fat. And saturated fat is something that is really important for our brain. And then our brain communicates with our ovaries to have
Mhm.
regular ovulation. And yeah, it's this thing that's not often talked about. And I'm really always amazed by the women who can kind of like pull themselves out of the vegan rabbit hole and like start to actually nourish their bodies again. And I think it's like quite a big journey, both on a practical physical level, but also on like a spiritual, energetic level. So what's that been like for you, like changing your eating patterns? What have you noticed?
It feels amazing. I do feel like that deep sense again of just primal, like eating meat straight from the bone. And I do feel, since I know it to be true in my head, I feel the fat supporting my hormones, like cortisol, stress levels. It does feel super supportive. Red meat, especially after bleeding and at all times, just feels really good.
Mhm.
More drawn to red meat for sure. Like, give me a burger every day. I'm good. Some people may not say, and there's so many opposing things to say about that. But for me, in my body, I feel really good. Yeah, I definitely, after I went 7 years not eating meat.
Wow.
I think you too, right?
Yeah, I think it was 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it feels amazing being back. Um, it's just more of like a deep feeling is what I feel of
Mm.
nourishment for sure.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. Like feeling deeply nourished
Yeah.
versus like being vegan and maybe feeling like light and healthy, which
Hmm.
I do think, I mean, I don't personally think veganism is a great diet for women, but I do think there's like a time and a place for detox. But detox can only come from like you can only detox a nourished body. Otherwise, what are you detoxing?
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah. And I think too that like nourishing yourself and like you said, like feeling primal, like eating meat off a bone. It's like that's like that sensation of free bleeding, of like seeing your blood on your thighs, of eating meat off a bone, of
Hmm.
you, I'm sure we'll get to this, like you living outside. It's like we are getting back to our roots and getting
Hmm.
back to like what our bodies were designed for and designed to
Hmm.
eat and how we were designed to be. I took a course one time by a woman named Kimberly Ann Johnson who does a lot of like nervous system work. And she talked about how when we are not eating meat, we can over identify with being prey when in
Mm.
we are predators. And so
Mm.
I noticed this too, and for sure in myself when I was a vegan, of having this very like sense of meek, shy, not speaking up very much, kind of
Mm.
like making myself small.
That's fascinating. I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Do you track that in yourself? Can you see that?
Yeah, I can totally see that. I've stepped into also with time and with years, I think it lines up. And for sure, that makes sense. They say we are what we eat. So if we're eating like the beast, we're gonna feel like the beast. And there's also like different, there's so many layers to it as well. Like buying meat from a grocery store where it's like wrapped in plastic and styrofoam and frozen, where, or if you know the neighbor farmer that's raising the cattle, there's a lot of layers to it too. I think one day what would be really cool, which is also controversial, would be hunting,
Hmm.
because then you have this deep connection of like calling in that one animal that's going to feed your family for months. So it does feel like a very cyclical, close to nature
Mm,
thing with the meat eating too, and trying to keep it as close to home as possible as well.
absolutely. I love that you brought that up because I think actually hunting is like a way more sustainable way to feed your family. You know, like I'm also not into factory farms and plastic wrapped meat. Like I love to buy meat from a farmer. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a friend who lives in Texas who half the year, like her husband hunts deer, and half the year they just eat like one deer, and the
Yeah,
other half the year they buy like a half cow.
yeah,
And like that's their meat for the entire year is those two things.
yeah.
Like how much more sustainable can you get?
Seriously. And then, like, if you're sacrificing the animal, then you have to process it and like be with it and be in that process with the animal is also like really deep.
Have you done that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Have you?
I went
Oh,
to
yeah.
the processing plant when we Mema and I both worked at a farm together. And I went to the processing plant and it was quite an intense experience. Especially because it was chickens. And this is so funny that this is what we're getting into on the podcast. Especially this is where it goes.
It's where
Especially
we met.
I know chickens, like it's like kind of on a mass scale there. And so I feel personally like it was a little bit much for my nervous system. I think it might be different if it was one animal. You know, like
Hmm.
here on the homestead that I'm working on now, she was like, "Oh, we can like slaughter one of the roosters and I can show you how." And so I think we're going to do that and it's like, okay, I feel like doing one animal like that to me is reverence and like being with it. And perhaps
Hmm.
there's like a way that I'd feel more comfortable seeing it on a bigger scale after that, but yeah, I just think getting back to the way that we were designed to live and eat as much as we can is actually what's going to soothe like our nervous system, which is very primal.
Hmm. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm curious
Mhm.
for women who are listening and they're like, I don't know how I could eat meat again. Like, what would you say to them? How did you make that shift?
I think knowing that it was sustainably grown and ethically grown is a huge, huge yes for me and a reason why I switched. I mean, and it's hard to always tell. Like you and I worked at an animal farm. I'm sure we both joined the farm because we were like, yes, we eat meat. Like we want to be in support of raising animals ethically.
Mhm.
Um, that honestly wasn't what it ended up being. But I think little choices like that, you know, it's hard to control everything. You're not gonna, what if you live in a city? You're not gonna raise a cow on your
Yeah.
balcony, you know?
Yeah.
But I think just trying to do it on a smaller scale is a nice step into it. and like giving thanks to the animal, really looking at your plate or like touching the raw meat that you're about to cook and pay respect to the animal.
Mhm.
Um, it also has to do with your relationship with death in a way. Like, I'm sure that cow had a beautiful life and you give thanks, and now its spirit is on to other things and it's not suffering anymore. Like, that's my relationship with just death in general. And so, yeah, just paying respect and thanking the animal, trying to do it on a more small scale level, knowing that they were raised in a pasture, knowing that they were eating grass and getting free time outside and lived a happy life, and just giving thanks to it. And reminding yourself that it is in support of your body. This is supporting your body's function. Your babies one day will thank you because you were nourishing yourself, and you'll continue to nourish them as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I love all of that. It's so true. And I think that we forget that it is like the right order of things, that like we're eating these animals and some animals eat other animals, and like we are human animals and we are living in right relationship with nature when we are doing that.
Hmm.
And that animals understand that, like it's on some certain level, all animals understand the natural order of things. And I love what you said too about like, this is nourishing my body. And that's sort of the prayer that I say almost every time I pray over a meal, which is like, thank you so much for your life. May it give me life force to then make this world a better place. Because
Hmm.
that's what it is. It's like this life force transference. And so it is kind of like an immense responsibility to be eating meat, because it's like, well, what are you going to do with that energy that you've now inherited from this other being?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
What are what are some of your favorite meals now that you're not raw vegan?
You
What do you
know,
love to eat?
it's interesting because I've eaten so many eggs that I'm hitting a point where it's like, whoa, I don't I go through phases. I'm like, eggs are a lot right now. But usually eggs, like a great eggy breakfast. I love meat in the morning, like ground beef, steak and eggs. I'll eat a leftover burger in the morning. I do feel good eating meats in the morning. Chicken too. You can really taste the difference in chicken of where you're getting it. Like
Mm-hmm.
chicken in the stores is like chewy and gritty, but
Yeah.
then when you get it locally, it's like this soft butter. I don't know. It's usually like all the meats. I try to go vegetable heavy too. Give me all the dairy. I feel good processing dairy. My
Mm-hmm.
body
Yeah.
processes it well. Um, Sauerkrauts, fermented things. Natalie and I both like ice cream. She's always like, let's get an ice cream.
Love ice cream.
So just really basic, but like no restrictions either.
Yeah. Yeah, like
So
it can be so simple.
yeah,
My favorite meal that I probably eat like sometimes every day I eat this meal, or like at least 5 times a week, is just ground beef cooked with like cut up sweet potato, some kale, and like sometimes some avocado or sauerkraut on top.
yeah.
It's like so good, so nourishing, and
Hmm.
like it's so simple.
Yeah. I think I eat like you too. Just simple spices thrown in there, always warm,
Hmm.
always cooked things now.
Yeah, say more about that.
I just know that I digest it better, cooked
Mhm.
foods. I guess it's already gone through a process of breaking down or
Yeah,
releasing some sort of enzymes.
yeah.
Um, just warm cooked foods, my body's digested better. All that roughage, like raw carrots and raw broccoli and raw salads, is really hard to
Mhm.
digest. So yeah, just feel good with my bowel movements, eating the cooked things and knowing that my womb is staying warm as well.
Yeah, it's so important to keep the womb warm because that's how blood flows. And when blood doesn't flow, that's what like creates stagnation, and stagnation creates pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like eating the warm foods, keeping your womb warm, that's like such deep self-care. And I love that that's a priority for you.
Yeah, and if you want, we can go into the stagnation thing a little deeper.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So I actually, I'd say the past year, I was having really painful periods. And then it started where I was having chronic pelvic pain.
Mhm.
In my mind, I was like, I want to see what's inside my womb. Let me get an ultrasound. Discovered some cysts there, went to a Chinese medicine doctor, and I really think that these herbs healed me. Like standing here 6 months later, after getting the first ultrasound and seeing a cyst, I feel like totally fine. My periods aren't painful anymore. I don't think I have any more cysts. I know that's also a natural thing sometimes that they come and go. It's part of ovulating, part of bleeding in a way. Um, but I do think that when I was eating all the cold foods and raw foods, I created a not happy environment for my blood to flow. And it's just all lined up to me prioritizing my womb's health. And these herbs really supported my womb's health, got that blood flowing. And it was a really scary process because you don't know who to turn to. It's like you think you're supposed to go to a gynecologist. Every time I'm in there, I end up crying. Like, they don't make me feel comfortable. I'm not supported.
Well, and what do they have to offer you there?
Literally, I've gotten no answers.
Yeah. They have
The
no
la-
idea.
the last one told me to go on birth control.
I remember you saying that. That's so insane. I want
Another And since I'm a traveler, I don't have a consistent anything. So I was like getting these ultrasounds because I want to diagnose. I think diagnosing is a nice thing just to sort of see what's up.
hmm
And I had to like go to all these urgent cares through the hospitals to get an ultrasound. And it just felt like I was going through so many hurdles to figure out what's going on. And then no one could really tell me.
mm
Natalie was a huge support, just like huge support, perfect timing. I didn't know who to turn to. Here I have this angel womb coach enter my life. I'm like, who to turn to? And this is your profession and your passion. And I think just hearing other women's stories really helps. Hearing people that study this stuff and take time to dedicate their life to learning about the women's reproductive health, because it's really hard to get the right answers or support I have found in the Western medical system. And the alternative medicine, the Chinese herbs, the goddess angels who are studying the women ways, it's really supportive. So I think too, it's a lot mentally because when all of this like scary, fearful stuff was happening, I was so in my head, like, I won't be able to give birth. I'm like infertile. I had such a deep fear of that. And that was controlling the outcome too. I think I kept feeling the pain. It was so sensitive to feel my womb in pain all the time. It's
mm
like such a sacred, sensitive spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you saying to me? Like, really trying to listen. And it's a lot, it's a big factor of things. Like in my life personally, I've been nomadic for 7 years. I haven't been somewhere for more than months at a time in 7 years. No rest. Really easy flowing, really easy to like keep going. But like, where's the time with myself? Where's the time feeling what's going on inside of me? So the womb was signaling to me, like, slow down, child, listen to me. Like, I'm going to put you in pain if you don't listen to my natural rhythms and needs.
Mm.
And so it's all been an unfolding of that.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting that like sometimes our womb will like give us very loud messages because she wants us to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like an element of that. And then there's also an element of like, of course, some things are going to pop up after you've been like eating colds, non-supportive for your body foods for 7 years, you know?
Yeah. It's all like aha, making sense. And sometimes that has to happen for the initiation to drop deeper into your body and into the right ways to support it, for sure.
So how are you supporting your body now?
Well, in a perfect world, sometimes it's hard. Like, I really want to rest as much as possible while I'm bleeding, do nothing, no hard workouts, be supported, connect to the earth, disconnect. Um, I find that to be really important. I also find it very hard to travel before my bleed. I'm like stressed out and I don't want to be social and things of that sort. Um, but also sometimes you can't control that all the time. So it's like, how do I want to respond when I do have a big trip right before my bleed or during my bleed? Like, I can ease into it, I can take it as slow as possible and not get stressed out, more stressed because I'm not just in my cave by myself bleeding. So just taking notice of while I'm bleeding, before my bleed, like being alone, listening deeper, eating more, um, knowing when to do those big workouts, those hard workouts, more when you're ovulating or when your energy is on the rise after the bleed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'd say exercise and exertion of energy at different times
Yeah.
during my cycle, eating more, my luteal phase,
Mm-hmm.
stuff of that sort.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so beautiful too to just hear the transformation of like you are you're moving from this place of like kind of being on the move, on the go. You know, there was birth control and then there wasn't birth control and the raw vegan thing. And then there was this big thing that your body was like, hey, it's time to check in. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, you know, our bodies, they do that for us when it's time to check in. And
Mm-hmm.
not only did your body ask you to check in, you listened. Like you had the courage and the willingness to listen to your body and to seek out opinions. And when a gynecologist told you to get on birth control, you were like, oh, that doesn't feel quite right for me. And so you
Mm-hmm.
took Chinese herbs. And I remember you were doing all this gut healing and you like actually took the time to try different things to listen to your body's needs. And that's incredible.
Yeah. Because it did hit like scary points too. It can get, when you're not supporting your body in the way it's supposed to be supported, it can get scary and painful. And yeah, that's also a big part of it. To the freedom is like sometimes it can be really painful to hit these points of turning. So yeah, thank you for seeing that.
Yeah. What were you? So you said it can get really scary. Do you mean like as far as the pain, or are you more talking about your thoughts you had about like what that meant?
Yeah, the two, having the pain of, oh, my body's talking to me from the inside. I can't see what's going on really. Why am I in pain all the time? And then, yeah, my mind going to the worst places of not being able to have babies, which is like my biggest fear. And then falling into that hole of like, oh, this is where I'm going. Um,
Mm,
and then also separate from my womb, just the lifestyle of always being on the go. I got a lot of sicknesses in my travels, which was different physical health stuff,
Yeah.
which I felt like my life was on the line at certain points because I wasn't listening to my rhythms of slowing down, of resting, of being alone.
Mm.
So the body definitely responds, and we can't take our health for granted either, because having your life on the line is a gnarly thing. So,
Mm. Yeah, it's such a big thing to walk through, especially like when you're in your 20s, you know? And I feel you. And I think a lot of women can relate in like anything that's going on with their womb and their health. Like I do this often where I'm like, oh my gosh, my fertility, is my fertility okay?
yeah.
And I think that that's such an innate thing. And our fertility is an expression of our innate vitality.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's really challenging because we want to be able to listen to our bodies and also like have the nervous system capacity to not go to the worst possible case scenario, which I think takes some practice
Mhm.
and the knowingness, which I'm sure you know now after having experienced it yourself, is like that our body actually wants to heal.
Mhm. It's resilient.
So resilient.
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes when I, this might be kind of mean, and I don't mean this in a mean way. Um, but I feel like sometimes when I think like, oh my gosh, is my fertility okay? I think about all the people that are getting pregnant that are like eating trash diets, like McDonald's and like
Oh, I think of that all the time. We're like crackheads. I'm like, they can do it. I can definitely do it.
right. And it's like, of course you want to be like earlier you said, you know, I'm doing this or like eating is good for your children. And so of course, like I don't want to pass down a bad genetic blueprint to my children. I actually often say to people like this diet stuff, this nourishment stuff, this is not for me. Like I'm doing this for
Mm.
children. And I
Mhm.
truly believe that. Like I truly believe that, you know, like I'm eating for my children. And I think a lot of us women can relate that we're trying to like heal this genetic passing down inheritance. But yeah, like it's also true that our bodies are so resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can bounce back, and it really is that mindset and that commitment to self too.
Yeah. So how is are you still having pain? Like or what's going on with that now?
I feel so much better. I'm really not feeling it. This last period was a breeze,
Ugh.
which, like, hasn't been the case. Usually, I'm hurled over in the night, like, not okay.
Mm.
And I'm feeling much better, which is really so miraculous.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So grateful to hear that. Do you think
Mhm.
if you were to say like what this is a tough question of what healed you because of course like healing is so multifaceted. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned the herbs and you've mentioned slowing down, which I know you've
Yeah.
slowed down lately. So tell me like what do you feel like was the most impactful on your healing journey?
Yeah, I think
And nourishment, right? You talked about nourishment.
mhm. I think living outside really supports me in that. Um,
Okay, before we go further, I want you to tell people about your living situation because that's really cool.
yeah, so I currently live in a tent with my partner. It's like a glamping tent, and it's something I've been doing for a while is living outside, living on farms, doing work trades. I'm on an herbalist farm right now, and I've lived with her 3 years ago on my own. I think something about having my partner as well and having that stability, like, he provides a lot of the masculine, a lot of the foundation, the support. I think I've been able to kind of fall into being held more, um, with the living outside thing because I have roughed it before, pooping in sketchy toilets, compost dirty, stinky toilets, and, something about this time around and having him really does support me. Uh, Knowing that I'm taken care of is really nice. That if I need help, he's got me. Um, I know I've got myself too, but this time around, I really feel more ease of
Mm,
surrendering. And I think my body feels that too of like I am stepping into more of my maybe mother role, more of this new phase of life. Where all that rocky maiden stuff is behind me a little more. I
mm,
really went through like wild waters and winds of traveling and exploring and journeying, which was so fun. But just this ease of like, okay, I have my person. This is where we're going. Living outside is really calming on my nervous system, like less stimulants. I get to just be in the greenery. Um, I think just those fundamentals of like foundation and support and sturdiness has really allowed me in my wildness to kind of step into more of that groundedness as well.
mm,
Um, we have like a clear picture of our future. You know, things are always going to come up, but from where I'm standing right now, I feel safe in where I'm going. And I think it's that feeling safe and stable that has really supported this time around and this shift of how my body's feeling and my health.
mm. Absolutely. Yeah, like female physiology actually requires safety to function properly. And so it sounds like you created healing conditions for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels really nourishing.
Yeah, safety in all senses, safety in where you are, safety in the people that are around you, safety, like we even create safety by eating enough,
Mm-hmm.
having our bodies knowing that we're going to have enough food to sustain
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you've been cultivating safety on all fronts, and that's created space for your body to heal.
Mm-hmm. And to be real too, like there's some points where I don't feel like I'm fully nourishing or supporting. Like I just started this restaurant job where I have to be at the restaurant at 7 a.m. and then I don't get my break to eat till 12. And by that time, I'm like overstimulated and not hungry. So, like, there still is, it's not perfect, but at least now I know what's right and what feels best in my body and how to support it when I'm not supporting it because yeah, sometimes it's rocky as well, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's like those little things. Like I had a friend when I studied abroad in Spain who had a tattoo that said, "Control what you can control." And it's like we can do so much to prioritize our nourishment, and it's almost like we do that so that the times that when we can't, we know that we're resilient because most of the time we do.
Mm.
And that's, I think, the sweet spot. Some people call it the 80-20 rule, like
Yeah,
80% of the time you do the best you can, and 20% of the time you let things slide. And I think
totally.
that's like humanness.
Yeah, we're messy.
Yeah.
We can know what's best for us, but sometimes we want to be bad too, in a way. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And like things are unpredictable. Like there's not, sometimes we sacrifice one thing for the sake of another. And
Hmm.
that's just like decisions that we get to make.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
So to be real too, because we're not these like perfectly evolved, figured all our shit out people, but
How boring would that be?
it's so boring, but we're slowly getting there.
I think it's so fun to, I mean, especially for me being like a practitioner to like use myself as a case study.
Yeah.
I've been telling a lot of people lately, I've been dealing with like a little bit of estrogen dominance. And so it's so like part of it is like, oh no, this is happening. Why is this happening? I do so good. But then it's also like, ooh, okay, fun. What's going on here? Let's pick this apart and like learn more about myself from this experience. And that's such a funny example because it's estrogen dominance. It's not like a big like emotional thing happened, but
Right.
it we get the opportunity to get to know ourselves better through all these experiences. And if you can orient your lens to that, which can be hard to do, but if you
Hmm.
can, it really like opens you up to the human experience.
Totally. And
Yeah.
like reminding ourselves not to be so hard on ourselves because we could learn all these things. But yeah, there's probably so many of us walking around with hormonal imbalances, you know, and while we want to master it and take care of it, it's also okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've kind of said a little bit about it, about where you are now, but I
Hmm.
like to ask women just like, we've kind of woven through your story through different phases. And so we've met Emma who got her first bleed and had a sweet sister support her in the wilderness, imprints that left for your new homelands. And we've moved through the years of birth control and then coming back to yourself and your wildness and your essence. And then we've kind of moved through this raw vegan and healing from that season to nourishment. And if you could share like where you are now, what does your relationship with your womb and your body look like now and your womanhood? How would you describe that?
Hmm. Just like this deep sense of needing to trust my body's wisdom, like trusting that I am in a healthy body, trusting that I'm going to make beautiful babies,
Yes.
trusting that I am powerful and that I am this body, but I'm also more than this body. It's so easy to hyperfixate on the body and feel small and confined, either in the looks of our bodies or yeah, mostly the looks as women too. And it's just like feeling good in my body wherever it's at, knowing I'm doing what I need to do to take care of it, and like, yeah, controlling what you can control. Uh, just this deep trust and acceptance and finding the beauty in all the cycles and all the phases. Yeah, I think taking notice of how I change each month within my cycle. It's like, all right, I bleed and I'm like internal and I'm letting go of things that need to be let go of. And I want to feel like dark and I want to feel like a sad little baby. But then I start to come up and I'm this flower that's blooming and my energy's rising and I'm remembering who I am and I feel on top of the world and so powerful. But then I start to become like grouchy and like everything's bothering me and like I don't want to go to this event. I don't want to do this thing and just honoring that I'm always changing, that we're always changing every single moon cycle and finding the beauty in all of it because sometimes it's very icky and sometimes it feels amazing. So finding the beauty in all the feels, knowing that nothing's permanent and yeah, just moving through life on this rock that's spinning around in outer space.
I love that explanation, that perfect explanation of all the phases of the cycle. That was one of my favorite things ever.
Yay.
Yeah, but it's so true. Like none of it is permanent. And being a woman, I think really teaches us that lesson.
Hmm.
We're just like constantly moving to the next thing, and something is arising and something is passing away, and it's constant.
Hmm. And the more we have each other is so supportive. Like I've also been, while I've been in a state of having a beautiful partner, I also want my women. And
Mhm.
like being a traveler, I don't have a group of women around all the time. So it's different. And like I just went on this beautiful bachelorette trip
Aw.
and I was with 12 sisters and we all just like cuddle and support and are holding each other and my nervous system is still feeling reset from that. Um so yeah, just having these conversations is really so supportive and I want to thank you so much for creating this space
Oh, thank you, Emma. I agree. Like women's stories are such medicine, and sisterhood is such medicine for us.
Hmm.
Well, I have one final question for you,
Yes.
which is if there was one piece of womb wisdom that you could leave the women listening, what would that be?
Mm. I think finding some sort of expression that makes you feel on fire or like beyond this realm. I think as women, we have this deep well of ecstasy to tap into, like whether it's singing or dancing or just like rolling around on the ground or like feeling some sort of release that's outside of like the confinement of our world or our minds, like tapping into this deep spiral of feeling. I don't know if I can even put that into words, but just going wild and being on your own doing it, like go into your room, put on your favorite song, sing, feel, move, get it out of the body, breathe deeply, um, and with other people too. But yeah, just continue to tap into these more creative feelings.
Mm, I love that. It's so true. And it's like our womb is our center of creativity, of sensuality and sexual expression, which is creative expression. And
Mm-hmm.
how beautifully you said that.
Mm,
And to remind women like that all of our desires and our desires are so sacred.
yeah, totally. And like, be big, take up space. Fuck them.
Yep.
Seriously. Ugh.
Oh, thank you, Emma. Thank you so much for being here. It's been such a treat to talk about all of this stuff with you, to get into nourishment and to hear your story. And I just love every conversation we have. And I know so many women are gonna love this too.
Thank you so much. I want to take a moment to honor you and all that you're sharing and just like the space and container and wisdom that you continue to hold. Like, I really hope that you feel that and you see yourself because you are so powerful and beautiful. And thank you. I feel so held and seen when I'm with you.
Thank you, love. This has been so nice.
So good. Feel inspired.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.